am to save the day. Remember that? Welcome to the show. Sorry I am late. Blame it on those listeners and subscribers, part of our stand-up community who kept me up and at the hangout last night. We had a really great time there with over 50 of you, and then I had to go pick up my daughter and all of her friends and take them home. And so here I am, late on a Friday morning, but I am here. We are here, more importantly, with Christian Finnegan and Jeff Jarvis. Two great conversations. I really enjoyed both of these conversations. Great insights and jokes and thoughts from both Christian Finnegan and Jeff Jarvis. You are going to love these conversations. I hope that you are doing okay on this Friday or whenever you are listening. I know you listen at different times, but most of you, I think, even listen to on the day that I drop. And you are doing better, definitely, than the chairman of a Russian oil giant, Lukoil, or is it Lukoil, who Thursday night, last night, he fell from a 6th floor window in a Moscow hospital. So, yeah, a lot of powerful Russian people or critics of the regime there, all from windows. So you're doing better than that guy. That we can say. And I hope that you had a great week. Thank you very much for those of you who listened to much or all of the shows this week. You're very special people, and you're smarter for it. You're more well-rounded for it. You've had a great experience listening this week to Dr. Aaron Carroll and first-time appearance on stand-up, the great journalist Amy Westervelt. We heard from Glenn Kirshner, Naira Hawk, S.E. Cupp, and Maura Quint. And yesterday, people loved both first-time guests, Dr. Victor Ray and activist and organizer on student loan debt forgiveness, Melissa Byrne. And I'm sharing clips now as much as I can. Thank you, Dr. Barry Hummel, Maddie Carlson, both getting on board for the video initiative and hopefully going to bring more people on as well. And I'll talk more about that as soon as we figure out what we're doing. And I can use your help. We're crowdsourcing different ways to contribute to and build our show. If you've got guest ideas, send them my way. Thoughts, criticisms, concerns, jokes, compliments, or anything else that can make this podcast smarter, funnier, more interesting, and informative each and every day. I am wide open to it. Okay, well, Jeff Jarvis and Christian Finnegan coming up. But first, I simply want to recap last night's speech by the President of the United States, Joe Biden, speaking last night in Philadelphia. I just want to give you a couple of clips, read something, reaction, and then we'll get right to the interviews. But the president last night gave a very important and consequential speech with just 66 days until the midterm elections. What are you doing to help get the vote out, organized for local candidates, etc.? I'd love to know if there's any candidates I should be showcasing or interviewing. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. 795 days until the 2024 election, by the way, if anybody's paying attention. But last night, the president delivered a 23-minute primetime address. He urged Americans to choose democracy over fascism while calling out by name Donald Trump and what he is calling the MAGA Republicans. And he keeps making an effort to discern them from most Republicans, which irked the hell out of my friend Elie Mystal and plenty of others, as did the president having Marines standing behind him and this weird red lighting behind him. Tucker Carlson said it was very, very scary. I'll give you both their takes, and a lot of other reporters had different things and thoughts about it that got panned as well. I think most of what I saw, most of the reaction I saw, was that it was really good. Some people said it was his best speech ever. So obviously, reactions from all across the spectrum. Anybody affiliated with the military, it would seem. My friend Allison Jaslow and Breonna Keeler, who's on CNN, and her husband is in the military. I think they were talking about it. Yeah. Breonna had tweeted about it. Allison tweeted about it. They thought it was unacceptable to ever have the military standing behind the president in a speech like that. So I'll leave you all to debate that. I have no idea necessarily. And apparently there was some heckler in the audience yelling, "Fuck Joe Biden" for like a few minutes, maybe even at the beginning. But here's about 2.5 minutes of the president. And if you've already heard this or you don't want to hear it, you can fast forward if you have access to your phone or wherever this podcast is playing on your computer or even your car radio. But here it is, 2.5 minutes. I thought this was pretty strong and well delivered. I kept wanting to find a soundbite to cut out, but I liked it all, so I'm sharing it.
I want to be very clear up front. Not every Republican, not even the majority of Republicans are MAGA Republicans. Not every Republican embraces their extreme ideology. I know, because I've been able to work with these mainstream Republicans. But there's no question that the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And that is a threat to this country. These are hard things. But I'm an American president, not a president of red America, blue America, but of all America. And I believe it's my duty to level with you, to tell the truth, no matter how difficult, no matter how painful. And here, in my view, is what is true. MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. They do not recognize the will of the people. They refuse to accept the results of a free election. And they're working right now, as I speak, in state after state, to give power to decide elections in America to partisans and cronies, empowering election deniers to undermine democracy itself. MAGA forces are determined to take this country backwards to an America where there is no right to choose, no right to privacy, no right to contraception, no right to marry who you love. They promote authoritarian leaders and they fan the flames of political violence that are a threat to our personal rights, to the pursuit of justice, to the rule of law, to the very soul of this country. They look at the mob that stormed the United States Capitol on January 6th, brutally attacking law enforcement, not as insurrectionists who placed a dagger at the throat of our democracy, but they look at them as patriots. And they see their MAGA failure to stop a peaceful transfer of power after the 2020 election as preparation for the 2022 and 2024 elections. They tried everything last time to nullify the votes of 81 million people. This time, they're determined to succeed in thwarting the will of the people.
All right, the president in Philadelphia last night. I'll give you Elie Mystal, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to give you Tucker Carlson as well, because I do want to give you perspective here on the program, but trigger warning. Jeff Zeleny, the New York Times, CNN chief national affairs correspondent, took a lot of flack for writing this. There's nothing unusual or wrong with a president delivering a political speech. It's inherent in the job description, but doing it against the backdrop of two Marines standing at attention at the Marine Band is a break with White House traditions. And everybody went crazy on him on Twitter because of how much Donald Trump used the military and every day broke from White House traditions. But I don't know. I didn't see that as the point by Jeff Zeleny. I mean, he would probably say, of course he did. Of course he broke all of those traditions, but it doesn't mean the next guy or gal should. You should get back to some of the norms and traditions of previous presidents. And I don't know, that's my interpretation. But former communications director for Senator Amy Klobuchar, Tim Hogan, said, won't somebody think of the norms? And then showed all kinds of speeches with the president having the military behind him, including a lot of people referred, of course, to George W. Bush landing on an aircraft carrier. But others, like University of South Carolina political science professor David Darmafal, corrected people like Breonna Taylor, saying it was a speech about defending democracy. Mary Trump, the former president's niece, who is a psychologist, added, I see everyone on CNN got their talking point, but this was not a political speech, unless you think condemning fascism and encouraging people to vote are political positions, in which case that's what we call a tell. CBS News' Ed O'Keefe also got criticized for equating a call to fight fascism and defend democracy as a political speech. O'Keefe characterized the fight for civil rights as partisan politics, which, of course, it's not, according to a lot of us. Here's Marquette University political science professor Julia Azari objecting to CBS Ed O'Keefe by saying this frame undermines both democracy and journalism. And White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain graciously challenged Ed O'Keefe by saying, yes, please do read the excerpts. They defend freedom, equality, democracy. They are as political as Ben Franklin saying in 1787 that the framers had given us a republic if you can keep it. And Dan Frumkin, who I have a lot of respect for, tweeted about Ed O'Keefe's tweet, Biden is describing a major democratic crisis that actually exists, but political journalists only see a Democrat saying negative things about Republicans, and so, you know, both sides. And White House Deputy Press Secretary Andrew Bates summed up what many were saying by saying, quote, democracy is not a partisan or political issue. So there you go. That's a lot of the debate you're seeing on Twitter, online as a result of the president's speech last night. Here is Ali Mistal on MSNBC reacting to some of it. And again, this is just a soundbite to part of the speech, but he was underimpressed because he didn't think, of course, Biden went far enough. And I heard this from other black folks. I was texting with Jason Johnson this morning. He also agreed with it.
He did use the term white supremacist once towards the end and did mention which I...
Yeah, I don't know who it's not all Republicans, just MAGA Republicans are for. Like, I'm sure that there are some white supremacists who will vote with white supremacists who don't think they're white supremacists. We're happy that Biden didn't call them a white supremacist, but like, it's not for me. What was for me, and you mentioned this already, but this is, I think, a really great bit, where he says to the heckler, that dude, that man, that person from the other side is entitled to be outraged.
Totally.
And that, to me, that is the difference between Biden and Trump.
Totally.
That is the difference between me and Jenny Thomas.
Right.
That is the difference between Democrats and Republicans, because Republicans right now would have that heckler be beaten.
Right.
They would say that heckler.
I don't know all Republicans, but Donald Trump
would certainly
has a record for saying.
Right? And Lindsey Graham would be like, okay, boss. Like, that's how they are at this point, right?
Ellie Mistal's sniveling Lindsey Graham point is hilarious. That's the kind of commentary, by the way, that Ellie and Jason Johnson and many others who happen to be black. Well, it irks people sometimes, especially cable news executives, because it makes certain viewers kind of uncomfortable too, because it's not the way they use humor to make a point is so important, but folks aren't used to it. They're used to that kind of dry Jeff Zeleny, John King, David Gergen analysis. And there's certainly a place for that. But there's also a place for Ellie Mistal and Jason and other people who use humor and passion to get their point across. You know who does that? Tucker Carlson. But in the most evil, pervasive, pernicious ways possible. And I do want to give you about 2 minutes of him, including the sound bites of Biden's speech that they edited and cut up. Here is Tucker Carlson, trigger alert.
We made fun of it at the top of the show because we didn't really know how else to respond, but Joe Biden really has crossed over into a very dangerous place. Tonight, he declared in a speech in Philadelphia that anyone who disagrees with him is a threat to the country. Here's part of what Biden said.
Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. That the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And that is a threat to this country.
Yeah, they're a threat, says the guy with the blood red Nazi background and Marines standing behind him. It's a complete outrage that this is being sanctioned as a White House event. In other words, that this is the approved position of our government. It's totally immoral. And then the guy who encouraged riots in 2020 accused MAGA Republicans of somehow threatening the rule of law in the United States. Watch this.
MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. They do not recognize the will of the people. They refuse to accept the results of a free election. And they're working right now, as I speak, in state after state, to give power to decide elections in America to partisans and cronies, empowering election deniers to undermine democracy itself. MAGA forces are determined to take this country backwards. They promote authoritarian leaders and they fan the flames of political violence that are a threat to our personal rights, to the pursuit of justice, to the rule of law, to the very soul of this country.
This is truly nuts and threatening to the future of the United States. It's hard to believe he just did that, but he did.
All right, there you go. The most influential person in right-wing media, arguably Tucker Carlson on Fox News last night, living as he always does, and as many of them do, in some kind of bizarro reverse world where they never, of course, had that kind of reaction to the most dangerous man in the world when he was the president. But now they're using all the kind of rhetoric that, frankly, we were using to talk about and warn and continue to warn about the MAGA movement and Trump, about Joe Biden, and those of us who want to preserve what's left of our democracy. So that's the obvious reaction to Tucker Carlson, I think. And we could go deeper. But I play that to give you some context and to see what they are thinking. I think it's important. I'm not going to give you a whole show. I'm not going to ask you to watch them. But from time to time, I do want to frame it up with different opinions and points of view. That was a big speech. I wanted to give you a comprehensive reaction to it. Maybe you're going to get a better one from CNN, the New York Times, or the USA Today in terms of what you need to know or the highlights, 5 big points on Biden's speech. But I did it in my way. I did it my way. Okay, sorry about that. Terrible. All right, let's get to my guests. How about it? I just did about 15 minutes there, and now it's time for the guests, the interviews, the bread and butter, what you came here for, the smartest voices in the world every day, usually 2 of them right here on this daily podcast. Tell your friends. Subscribe now. Welcome to and thanks to new subscribers. I'll give you shout outs next week, but I got to get this baby posted. I am late, and it's time to get to Christian Finnegan. Coming up, Jeff Jarvis. Great conversation with Jeff. We talked about all kinds of things, media, politics, even sports. For a minute, we were just talking about Serena and the significance of her performance at the U.S. Open this week, and tennis in general, and what it's like to go to the U.S. Open. We did a couple minutes on that. It was interesting. Jarvis, big tennis fan, didn't know it. But first, comedian Christian Finnegan joins me. We had a great conversation. Can I just say, I said it before, I think this guy's as good at communicating and framing things and contextualizing and using metaphors and making me laugh to talk about politics and anything else about life as anyone in media. I love him. They should give him a contributor deal at one of the cable news networks or have him on NPR every week or whatever. But in lieu of that, I'll keep talking to him because I really adore the guy and I think he's so smart and I love listening to his analysis. So go follow him right now on Twitter at Christ Finnegan. Buy his comedy albums, see him live, and subscribe to his Substack newsletter, which is so good. New music for olds. I can't say enough about it. If you're like me and you don't discover new or old artists very often, then you should subscribe. And it's really funny and interesting. And it looks like, by the way, we will get Ophira Eisenberg back on the show. I know many of you have reached out and said, where's Ophira? She'll join us, I think, next week. We were talking about wrestling. I often just am recording and then I decide where I want to start the interview with a guest like Christian. And we were talking about the state of pro wrestling because you must watch this video in his timeline of this weird kind of alternative wrestling league where the wrestler is a pizza maker and his gimmick is he's tossing a pizza dough up while he's wrestling. It's hilarious. I'm telling you, that's why Christian tweeted it. It's so funny. And of course, Christian had some interesting and intelligent analysis about the state of pro wrestling today. And that's where we started. We just spent a minute on it. I thought it was interesting and worth keeping in. And then we get into potentially more important issues and topics. But I love this. Here we go.
There's no pretense that it's real anymore. I mean, unless you're 7 years old. But I think even teenagers understand that it's a performance. You know, and I think that there's a segment of sort of ironic wrestling fans who have sort of super embraced that. I think especially there is all these indie wrestling leagues now. Yeah. That are not, Yeah. And I think that's what that dude is probably part of, kind of the sort of hipster wrestling world that kind of just embraces the silliness of it.
Well, okay, so that's a real character in wrestling. A pizza guy.
Yeah, they're literally all I've seen is that video. I haven't done any research on this.
I think it's a joke. I don't think it's in any way. The funniest thing is when he throws the dough up and the guy just gets annoyed and smacks it. Like, get this fucking shit out of here. We're wrestling. I laughed as hard at that as I've laughed at anything in weeks.
And it's honestly just the dough spinning itself is impressive. Just even if he was just standing and doing it.
Super entertaining.
Absolutely.
Wildly entertaining. These spinning dough. And, dude. All right.
Have you ever thought about like what your wrestling character would be?
No, I haven't, and I should because it'd be funny. But I know who I liked.
Who do you like?
I was huge into wrestling when I was 10, 11, 12. We went. My dad took my brother and I to the Syracuse Civic Center, or as it was called, War Memorial, maybe 3 times, maybe more, and it was as good as it gets. Like, you were into music concerts, that kind of a live experience, and we never went to a concert, but we definitely went to auto races, baseball games, football games, lacrosse games, and wrestling.
And who were your favorites?
Sorry.
Who did you root for?
I loved Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
Oh,
and I liked Superfly Snuka, and I did Junkyard Dog. I only liked good wrestlers, obviously, because it's me, who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Who did you like?
Well, for a period in my childhood, I was into Texas wrestling, which was a small league, which had the Von Erich brothers, which were 3 brothers who I think are all dead in weird and tragic circumstances.
Yeah.
I did love Jimmy Snuka quite a bit. I remember being very upset.
You just called him Jimmy?
Yeah, Jimmy, Superfly Jimmy Snuka.
Yeah.
That's and I remember the episode of Piper's Pit.
Love it.
Where Roddy Piper lured Jimmy Superfly Snuka into the Piper's Pit and then bashed him in the head with a coconut. And it was a real betrayal in my eyes. Looking back, I should have seen it coming.
I think it was deceptive. I judged that as a deceptive and violent thing to do. Like, what kind of a fucked up thing would that? Roddy Piper was a motherfucker. He was a real, very Trump-like.
And certainly some racism involved there. You know, beating him with a coconut. I think that was meant to imply some sort of like, you know, you're this island boy, and I'm going to hit you with a coconut.
You know, that brings up a lot of other issues that probably occurred in terms of, like, I don't know what you would call it if it's cultural appropriation, but the idea that you wanted to wrestle and you're sitting there trying to come up with what your wrestling gimmick would be, and you start questioning, almost like a comic, what's my on-stage persona, who am I? But in this case, it's like, my dad is Russian. My mom's from Toledo, but I'm now Nikolai Volkov, the Russian, or the Iron Sheik, or any of these other people. They might have just been American kids. There was some ethnicity. I don't know.
Oh, I'm sure.
I you know what? There's probably a million podcasts about this, so I'm not even going to belabor it anymore.
I know. And I may have said this before, but once I was flying across country and I was on JetBlue, and I was back when MTV used to have some sort of programming. They had this show called Tough Enough, which was a reality show for wrestlers. And one of the episodes was a professional wrestler taking all the contestants and working on what their personas were going to be. And his advice, I thought, was so directly applicable to comedy, which he said, like, you don't want to just make up something out of nowhere. You want to take something from your personality, like some personality trait you already have, and then turn the volume up on that.
Right.
Which I thought was exactly what comics do, really.
So why didn't you do that?
I have no idea. I'm still looking for what my persona is going to be. I figure another 15, 20 years and I should have nailed something down to take that Andy Kaufman down a peg. And I feel like I'm the man to do it.
Well, there's a bunch of things I want to ask you that I think we haven't talked in a few weeks. We both took some time off. You did something seemed like a lot of fun. You and your wife went on a trip throughout upstate New York, all the way up to Niagara Falls. I want to ask you about it, but specifically, I kind of decided here at 46 that August is the absolute best time to take a couple of weeks, at least, if you can. If anybody could ever get 2 weeks, or a week at least, off. And I wonder what your feelings are about the month of August coinciding with vacation, with taking time off, if that's a tradition or if it just happened, because I've decided this year that's That's a thing that we should all do. August should shut down like in Italy or Europe.
Well, it kind of does. I mean, that's, in terms of comedy, I mean, Cambry, my wife, QED, the last 2 weeks of August are always just brutal. And, it makes her miserable because you're losing money and the shows are bad because there just aren't big audiences. And so she kind of learned her lesson this year. And it's like, screw it. Let's just take the last 2 weeks off. And, a lot of the restaurants, like the restaurant that QED works with to sort of give us food, they go to Greece for 2 weeks at the end of August.
Right.
And so it always creates a lot of drama. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, and in the entertainment industry in general, it's like, I know back when I used to have a role in the entertainment industry, I knew that like my manager was going to be completely non-existent in August. And God forbid if you had a TV show, and nothing happens, just nothing happens. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're going to, I mean, I always still think of September as being the beginning of the year. To me, I still have that sort of back to school feeling. Like January never feels like the beginning of the year to me ever. But around this time, it does feel like kind of putting a bow on the last year. And then September, you kind of hit the ground. And
because there's no more concrete transition. It's so ingrained. I like what you're saying. I've never thought of it that way, but because of school for the first, 12 years, 15 years of life, this is a major transition. A stark summer ending, school starting means pretty much the same thing for anybody, whether they enjoy their life, their summer or school, or hate it all. That's a serious, and I'm, witnessed that with my own daughters. So we still kind of have that if you have kids. And some of these insane sociopaths states, they go back in like early August.
Yeah, I know. It's very weird. Yeah. So I've seen, because when I was a kid, I think you even tweeted something to this effect that when I was a kid, it was always the Wednesday after Labor Day.
Yeah,
that's what it was. And now, some kids are going back in mid-August, which seems, weird. I think some of it has to do with the part of the country in terms of the weather maybe.
Yeah.
But we had a great time. We were gone for 8 days and we just got back last night. And we went to the gorges in Ithaca and Watkins Glen. And then we went up to Niagara Falls. And then we went to Seneca Falls and did some suffragette history stuff. And then we went to Herkimer and we went to a Herkimer diamond mine. And then we went up to Lake Placid. And then yesterday we went to Fort Ticonderoga. So
of any of those, were any of a bust?
No, I would say no. I mean, because there's something interesting in each one. I mean, Herkimer is a little silly with this diamond, quote unquote, diamond mine, which is really just quartz crystals. But we went and banged on a rock for 40 minutes.
Is it true that they had children still working in the mine actively?
Well, I saw a lot of children being whipped. Right. I don't know if that was just for pleasure.
No. Listen, I'm from up there. That's Herkimer for you.
Okay, yeah. I wish you could all see the mugging face Pete just made.
It's beautiful up there, and just so folks know, it might arguably one of the most beautiful parts of the entire country, and I'm referring to the Finger Lakes region, which I think a lot of people just don't know anything about in upstate New York, and maybe Minnesota could give it a run because they have lakes everywhere. But those lakes, they're huge, and what would you say about that?
They're unreal.
Vineyards too.
New York State. I mean, I understand why New York City is New York City and all that, but I don't think I fully appreciated just what New York State has to offer.
Thank you.
I mean, all the gorges we went down were just unbelievable, and in the mountain air, and we went up to Lake Placid for the second time, which is just it's really absurd, and you just breathe easier, and I had what I refer to as vista overload, which is
I like
too many beautiful views, and you kind of almost can't process them at a certain point.
It's absolutely wonderful. And by the way, you did just use up your second gorges. You're out of them, but I do.
All right.
Just give you a heads up there. Can't say it again. But
have you ever been to a KOA?
Yes.
We went to 2 KOAs. This is my first KOA experience.
Yes.
And it's incredibly dorky, and I loved it.
Oh, it's
really...
dorky. What does it stand for, by the way? How would you describe it to people who don't know? Campgrounds that have like...
It's like a campground that feels like a summer camp. I mean, there are spaces for RVs and spaces for tents, but then there's also cabins you can rent out, like little one-room cabins. And there's, usually a putt-putt course, and there's kids running around, and there's a pool, and it's all very family-friendly and silly. But I kind of loved it. Like I would happily spend a week just at the KOA.
We did that most recently. I did it growing up because my dad was very cheap, but we did it with our kids in Martha's Vineyard at a KOA. And it was so much fun outside of the sexual assault that takes place in the shower area, which is kind of a given at those places. But
it is there are communal bathroom facilities. That is true.
A lot of problems arise, I'm guessing. I'm just making that up. I have no idea what I'm talking about. But I just know Christian was at one, and that must have been weird for kids. But here's the other thing is, and then this is the second time mentioned this week on the podcast, Seneca Falls, and that you mentioned the suffragette. I went to the museum, the Women's History Museum there. Of course, that's where the movement, I think, began for the right to vote. For women, but it sounds like you went on some kind of deeper tour into some of the.
No, not really. I mean, honestly, a lot of the stuff I couldn't go in because we had our dogs with us, and so I let Cambry go in. Like, I'm not going to be like, "Hey, woman, stay with the car. I'm going into the Suffragette Museum." That would have not gone over terribly well. But we did a lot of the stuff, and we also went to a lot of the. There's a lot of abolition history there. John Brown's house and. Harriet Tubman's house and all sorts of stuff. Just enough to make us feel like the trip was 25% educational.
That's awesome. I didn't know that about John Brown's house. Huh.
Yeah, it's right up. Yeah, that's up near Lake Placid, and Harriet Tubman's house is in Auburn, which is right near Seneca Falls. Right. And we went to a drive-in movie, which was fun.
I saw that. What is there any attraction to it other than the novelty of it? Because the quality can't be great.
No, it's mostly the novelty. Okay. It is mostly the novelty, but the novelty is not nothing.
We went to one. It wasn't great. We went to one and I didn't have a great experience. It was like people were being annoying and I couldn't hear it. And I was like, is this? But you probably went to a much better one, I bet you.
Well, we went to see Top Gun, which we had already seen.
Oh,
which
I saw it.
And so the fact that I wasn't really, I didn't have to know what was going on, that I'd already seen the movie, definitely made a difference. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's just, I used to go to ones in Cape Cod when I was a little kid, and there's just something fun about sitting in your car and watching a movie.
Yeah, it's like you're pretty guaranteed you're going to have sex too.
You'd think, wouldn't you?
Well, you're married. I mean, but like
I remember once when I was in college. I was in Cape Cod for the summer, and I hung out with this girl who I knew from college, who I didn't, she was like a friend of my ex-girlfriend's, but she lived in Cape Cod, and we went to a drive-in, and I had only ever been as like a 9-year-old. And so we watched the movie, and then as we were pulling out, she looked at me and she's like, I think this is the first time I've ever been to the drive-in where we just watched the movie. And I realized I completely dropped the ball. That it was like, the minute she said, yeah, let's go to a drive-in movie theater, I was in. But I was too dumb to have realized that.
I can't really tell. I never went out with a girl.
In any context?
Anyway, so yeah, I think when I was like 22, no, I did. There's a couple girls in high school. Shout out to Shannon and Leslie, great gals, and shout out to more gals that put me in the friend zone. So I wanted to get your take. Because you always have an original, no matter what. Like, even this is a perfect situation to showcase, I think, Christian's thoughtfulness and opinions on things. We've been talking about this college loan forgiveness all week, and I knew you'd have some thoughts about it because I know you, and I think they're going to be somewhat unique that we haven't quite heard them. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you'll say what others have said. And either way, I want to get your take on this because people have a lot of opinions. We've been talking about it, debating it. For about a week now since it was announced. And what are your thoughts? You got a great college education somehow.
I did. I can't claim that my thoughts are unique with that build up that you just gave me.
Sorry.
My thoughts are not completely idiosyncratic. I was worried a few months ago when the $10,000 number started floating around that Biden was doing this sort of standard Democratic mistake of trying to split the baby and satisfying nobody, where it's like, okay, you're not going to cancel debt. This isn't going to make a huge impact in most people's lives, the people who need it. And you're also going to get tagged by the Republicans for giving away free money. You know what I mean? So it's like, in my mind, and I guess I still kind of feel this way to agree, if you're going to do it, do it. Like, you're not going to get credit from Republicans for, well, you know what, he only gave 10,000, you know, and 20,000 for Pell Grants. Right. Like, it was actually pretty reasonable. No, they're going to treat him like he's, you know, literally they have him shooting money out of a t-shirt cannon. Like, that's the graphic going around. So, you know, but I will say, once it actually came down, I was pretty happy with, you know, the unanimous, at least on the left, praise of it. And, you know, it's refreshing to me. It reminds me of that sort of heady first 100 days of the Biden administration, where it really felt like he was going to listen to the more progressive wing of things, you know, before he kind of started cowering again. And I think what I hope that the last 2 months has shown is that it's better to do things than not do things. That trying to sort of, you know, be about kitchen table issues and trying to sort of work around the fringes and kind of not make a misstep is just it's like when a football team plays prevent defense, you know, at the end of the game, and they say the only thing they prevent is winning. You know, that we're up 20 points, so we're going to play it really safe, and then they end up losing the game. You know, the Democrats do that, except they're not even up 20 points. Right. They're down 20, and they still think working around the margins is going to make a change. You know, but I mean, I don't think anybody saw the Manchin turnaround happening, and so obviously that put a lot of wind in Democrat sails. But I really think that vibes, as annoying as it is, a lot of people want to be on a winning team, and that's what gets them excited. Yeah. Even more than any specific policy is the idea that a political party is moving with confidence and assurance and is just doing shit, is just doing stuff. And I think you can see it, you know, all of the sort of enthusiasm that Democrats have sort of developed over the last 4 weeks, that trickles down to low information people. You know, the people who a few months ago were sort of just kind of just having a field day. And I see it just in terms of club comics. You know, the Biden's old, the Biden can't ride a bike, you know, the sort of hack road comic stuff, or not even road comics, but just club comic stuff I see. Yeah. I don't think a lot of those jokes that they were making a month ago would work now, because there's just a general attitude that no, Democrats are doing some stuff right now. And obviously the Trump, you know, stuff, it doesn't hurt. I mean, I'm already seeing people like Claire McCaskill, you know, cautioning against talking about Trump. It's like, no, we should talk about, you know, the Democratic, you know, again, kitchen table issues and all that bullshit. It's like, no, like, this is when you have to put your foot on the gas. Like, you have the advantage. You have them on defense. There should not be a moment where you let Republicans regroup and sort of all decide on a bullshit narrative that they're then going to, you know, stick to. You know, this is the time to do more stuff. Keep doing more stuff. I mean, because, all right, they had a week where they bitched about student loan forgiveness. Do something else now where they can't, you know what I mean? Like, don't let the narrative settle in that they're, you know, I just think that being active is the answer, and sort of just hoping that people are going to reward you for stuff you did last month is not the answer. These last 60 days, by the way, I love all of the analysis that you just gave me, your opinions, your thoughts, your observations as a comedian as well. It's all really good. So you're wrong. That was idiosyncratic, and I would never use that word if you hadn't used it first. But I might be wrong about this. This is maybe, you know, again, completely anecdotal and based on my interactions in my Twitter feed and whatever. But I feel like the whole anti-woke, anti-CRT, I feel like that's starting to feel passé now. I feel like they've wrung all the blood they can from that stone, and they kind of they did it too early. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, no one, I just don't, it doesn't have the juice it does anymore. You still see, even with what's going on with Trump and then in the National Archives stuff, with everything that's going on, you still see these same people talking about woke college students, or just these narratives that maybe seemed really vital 3 months ago. But I don't know, man. I'm optimistic in a way that I haven't been recently.
Well, there's about 60 or so days left before the midterms, and we all have varying opinions as to how consequential they could be for democracy and simply for the House of Representatives, which the Democrats are, I think probably it's fair to say, still likely to lose. But boy, who would have thought we'd be here 60 days in? And you make a lot of good observations. And the point about the anti-CRT, anti-wokeness maybe playing out, the timing of it, that's really interesting. I'm not sure, but I do share your sense around that. But more importantly, maybe along with that, you had the search of Mar-a-Lago, and you took away one gender's bodily rights, and those things really. The question was always the obvious question: how animated would people get, women get, men get? And now it seems pretty obvious that people are animated. I don't know what you would say about it, but what do you think about those things also energizing people, voters, people who don't even think about politics now with the abortion thing?
I think, first of all, I don't want to look at the repeal of Roe as being a positive. Like, I don't want to be like, hey, great, this is going to be great electoral news for Democrats because they'll be able to mobilize people. I would still, on the whole, I wish Roe was not repealed, regardless of what it means for one midterm election. But it did get repealed. And so it would be political malpractice to not make as much hay of that as possible. And I think that for a lot of people, they kind of just assumed that things like Roe versus Wade were just settled, that there was a group of people that was always going to whine about it. There was always going to be protesters at abortion clinics, and maybe certain states would limit it to a certain number of weeks already. But I think when it actually was repealed, and seeing all the people who want to now go for a national ban on abortion, it's real in a way that I don't think it was before. And I include myself in that to some degree. I mean, one of my favorite movies. Have you ever seen Citizen Ruth? I
don't think I have.
It's great. It's Laura Dern, and it's Alexander Payne's first movie, and it's it's all about abortion, and it's a very funny movie. But one of the takeaways of it is that you have one side. It's kind of a both sides movie where nobody actually cares about the woman who's pregnant. The anti-abortion people want to use her for their purposes, and the pro-choice people want to use her for their purposes, and nobody actually cares about Ruth, the main character. Well, I mean, I think that one of the reasons that resonated with me and with a lot of people at the time is because we did sort of think that that the status quo was going to be forever, is that there were just always, it was kind of this trench war that was never going to really, the basic dynamics of the debate were never going to change. And so it was easy to kind of blame both sides, or not blame necessarily, but to say, oh yeah, these people hate her, these people hate these people, like they hate each other and nothing's ever going to change. Well, and I guess to Republicans' credit, they understand that it's like, if you basically just focus all your attention on stealing the Supreme Court, then that stalemate can be broken. And, I think a lot of us have woken up to the fact that like, oh, wow, Democrats spend so much time defending institutions on principle. I think sometimes we assume certain things are institutions that actually aren't. They're not legal statutes. They're just the way things have been done for the past few decades.
I wish I could think of those snappy quotes about it's your democracy if you can keep it and protect it that certain smart people say.
It always sounded very theoretical, but it doesn't seem as theoretical anymore.
Certainly not. What do you... I wonder if you can... I should ask you to think about this before we talk every Friday when we usually talk, which is like outrage of the week. I know you try not to let things get to you. I have my practice, but if you're paying as close of attention as you and I do, for better or for worse, you're going to see something that Jesse Waters said, or that Steven Crowder or Mark Levin for me this week did or said. And I wonder if there's an outrage of the week in terms of a thing that happened or something that someone said that you just, I don't know, for lack of a better phrase, couldn't believe that you read this thing.
This might not be the perfect week for that because I was sort of blissfully not online for the past 8 days.
Oh, good. Well, then,
I was more than I should be, but probably half of what I would be on a normal week. There were periods of time where I genuinely did not have service.
Great.
But, you know, I mean, I guess a lot of the student loan stuff, you know, just the kind of predictable sort of acting like anyone who has a college education is Little Lord Fauntleroy. You know, that it's just so ridiculous because for decades, and this isn't something I came up with, but, you know, for so many decades as America's industrialization ended and the technology economy started and the service economy happened, that, you know, people, middle class people and, you know, and working class people were told that education was their ticket out, that if you want to survive in the 21st century economy, then you got to go to college and you have to have a college degree, you know, and now they've been totally exploited for that. You know, they've been taken advantage of. You know, when we were kids, like our parents, a college degree was for our generation what a high school degree was for our parents' generation. It was sort of the bare minimum. And the difference is that a high school education didn't cost anything, you know?
Right.
And so if we're going to tell people that, like, hey, go learn to code, or, you know, all these, you know, take part in the 21st century economy. Well, at the same time, you know, education is getting less and less affordable, but you're telling students like, well, you'll make it back on the back end, but then they never do. You know, I mean,
especially if a lot of those people that fall in the category of forgiveness graduated around, say, 2008 when the entire economy collapsed. And then for years later, no matter what college you went to, you weren't getting a great job. And things were really bad for people who graduated around that time. They, you know, they might have, if you really want to, I guess, I don't know, you should have known the loan that you were signing up for and you should have known the interest rate. Well, they're called predatory loans for a reason. They prey on you in the fine print. But even if you knew that, you still would have played the odds because you would have thought, well, at least I'm still going to get a job. Well, 2008, 9, 10, shit was horrible for recent college grads. And they're the ones, they never, it's like me buying a house in 2008, by the way. Like we bought a house in a place north of New York City that always gained value, except for this one moment in fucking time, hours.
Yeah. Well, and it's just, and also it's like, this is better for everybody. It's better for the economy. Yes. All that money. These people, this $10,000 is not getting, you know, tucked away in a bank account in the Cayman Islands. This is all that money is going to be spent to, I'm going to, you know, replace my car, my shitty car. Yeah. I'm going to move. I'm going to get a new sofa that I've been wanting to get for 5 years. Where, you know, this is money that's going to go right back into circulation, which helps everybody.
Apparently, in your example, furniture stores, like a couch place.
Specifically, Jordan Marsh.
Okay. Wow.
Jordan's Furniture, which is a famous furniture store in the New England area.
Huh.
It's a big. The commercials are legendary. Two of the best Boston accents you've ever heard in your life.
Oh, I got to go. I'm sure they're on YouTube.
Jordan's Furniture, left on Spickbrook, right on Daniel Webster. I heard that a million times as a child.
Well, I don't know. Maybe you didn't pay that close attention. I'm glad you didn't because you're away. But the last thing I wanted to ask you was just about if you did pay attention. If not, we can say goodbye. But I wanted to get your thoughts on the circus surrounding this the search of Mar-a-Lago. And you know, the most recent development is a photograph. Like they caught him with weed and guns and their Coast Guard and they're smuggling. Like these are the types of photographs that law enforcement, from local to sheriff to FBI, puts out when they catch somebody. You know, they always just, in this case, is the former president of the United States with files that most of us have never seen what they look like. And they're laid out on the Mar-a-Lago rug. And here he is melting down on his alternative social media network whose bills he doesn't pay to basically incriminate himself. And his lawyers, too. Have you been paying any attention to this? Because it is a wild ride.
Of course. I mean, how could you not? But, you know, it's funny because I feel like and granted, obviously, dealing with a private citizen, even an ex-president, is not the same as dealing with a sitting president in terms of the levels of defense that they have, the buffers that they have in between them. They're now dealing with a crazy private citizen as opposed to a crazy president, which is a lot easier. But I feel like they finally kind of become wise to a very vital part of Trump's MO, which is to, for lack of a better word, like weaponize your dignity and propriety. That I think a lot of people, when the search happened, a lot of Republicans, on cue, following Trump's lead, kind of said like, this FBI raid, like they might have planted stuff. Who knows what they were doing, because they kind of assumed that the Department of Justice would never actually say, that they would be dignified and professional and be quiet about the whole thing. And so they could kind of almost weaponize that and fill the breach with all their bullshit, flood the zone, as Steve Bannon would say. Yeah. But, the difference is he's not the president. And so when he has directly challenged the Department of Justice and the FBI about some of this stuff, the FBI has been able to be like, here are your answers. You wanted to know? Here it is. You know what I mean? Like, Trump is the one who even told us that he was raided in the first place. And so, I mean, it's. Well, I feel like maybe
we shouldn't say raid. We should say search. But specifically because of what you're saying, the FBI went in there quietly without their jackets, their CBS version, those blue jackets with the big, without the fanfare. They did not want to make a big deal of it, and yet he told that everybody that he had been raided, and they're looking through his wife's drawers, and then that's where they found a lot of his hopes and dreams. Like I mean, like he told them, he told everybody.
Yeah, but I think that they've kind of gotten wise to the fact that like, oh, he's going to keep daring us to show proof. Yeah. And we're in the position where we actually have it. Yeah. And so, he just keeps digging deeper. And I think his sort of fallback is, at the end of the day, they don't want civil war. So they're not going to. Donald Trump doesn't know how to do anything but double down, which has served him very well. I think it caught a lot of people by surprise. It was sort of like when you bring a foreign plant from another country to America, and the ecosystem doesn't know how to deal with it. And so it, or an animal, like you bring a certain variety of frog back from Australia, and it wreaks havoc on the crops. And I feel like for American institutions, they've never dealt with somebody who just continually doubled down and continually pushed shit. No, now they're finally getting wise on the proper way to deal with this guy. And that's so well said. And the best example I can think of him doesn't know anything better than double downing. And he's like, John McCain was a coward. I don't like people who get caught. And then the world was, sir, have you no decency? How dare you? That is a war hero. And he's like, I don't like him. Doubles down. Didn't matter. But now... Yeah. And also I think a lot of people have sort of they've come to the realization that like there's a certain segment called 35% of America who just are not going to be convinced. They cannot be convinced, because as I've said a million times, and I'll keep saying, they're not defending Trump. They're defending themselves. They're defending their own sacrifice of their own dignity over the past 6 years. And they keep hoping that he's not going to embarrass them further. And the thing that we know about Trump is he will always embarrass them further. But do you know what I mean? Like, yes. If you had asked them 5 years ago, hey, if Donald Trump brought home top secret stuff that from the White House and kept it in his fucking desk drawer, would you defend that? Be like, of course we wouldn't. That's insane. We would never let anybody get away with that. But inch by inch, he keeps, eroding their self-esteem and their dignity to where now they have no choice. There's nothing to be gained for them by saying, you know what, we were wrong about this guy. Right. All they can do is just fall back. So hard to argue with. But the final way to illustrate your point you just made, I think, is he's doubling down with screaming publicly, hey, they took my stuff and they spread it out all messy. And then the rest of the legal analysts I'm watching are saying, he just admitted that he took these files, which aren't his. Everybody knows that. And he admitted he had them.
there. He's admitting basically to stealing them and saying they're his, and he's mostly upset that the way that they laid him out on his shitty rug. It's an admission of guilt, where even his lawyers apparently might need lawyers because they're like, yeah, he turned them all back in, and no, he didn't. Not even close, apparently. Not even close. Yeah, the idea, you never hear a drug dealer being like, I keep my heroin filed very nicely in very well maintained drawers. You know what I mean? Like, they put it all out on a table like I was some sort of slob. That's not really the issue here. Christian Finnegan, everybody, thank you very much. As always, love talking to you. Thanks, Pete. Okay, there you go. Christian Finnegan, everybody. Isn't he great? At Christ Finnegan on Twitter. I love that. That was very funny and poignant and interesting and awesome as always. Okay, and now it's time to get to my second and last guest of the week, but certainly one of our favorites. I love Jeff Jarvis. I love talking to him about anything from Serena at the U.S. Open to white supremacy and media and politics and aging. We talked about becoming old men. He's a bit ahead of me, but he's been dealing with some health issues, and I think it's important for us to talk about that, and we were even able to make light of them. Jeff is on Twitter at Jeff Jarvis, and he is, of course, a professor of journalism at the Craig Newmark New School for Journalism. Dude's resume goes on and on. He founded the magazine Entertainment Weekly. Howard Stern helped make Jeff's work famous because Jeff was always an interesting supporter of Howard Stern's radio show, especially when it wasn't popular. He's a great media critic and journalist himself. I always love talking to him about anything. Go to buzzmachine.com for more of Jeff's work and about Jeff. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Jeff Jarvis. There he is, ladies and gentlemen. The legend joins us now, and he's in his, I feel like you have a signature, like, black shirt. I feel like I'm seeing a pattern. You're like Steve Jobs.
It's all I own. Uniqlo black shirts. I've got long sleeve and short sleeve. That's it. Basically, I gained weight, and so I didn't want to mess around. So I have the same jeans. In the pandemic, I've been patching the jeans because why not?
So you wear the same pair of jeans every day?
No, I wear the same brand of jean every day.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Not the same pair, no. I do wash them.
Well, I mean, what would be the issue wearing the same jeans 3-4 days?
I wear couple of days, but
yeah. I'm just wondering because I haven't changed my clothes in a month. But I also do. It makes life easier if you don't have to think at all about what you're going to wear. And there's a lot of people who do that, I guess.
Yeah, for me, it's more ego because this is a bulky shirt and I've gained a lot of weight. And so.
How much weight have you gained?
About 40, 50 pounds.
Really? Is it a pandemic thing?
No, well, no. It's just that my old guys talking about their problems. My feet got all messed up, and I can't walk as much as I used to, and less exercise, and that's it.
No, I like talking about that stuff, especially men. I want to host a whole podcast, like maybe called "Old Guy Talking About Their Problems," because old guys don't talk about their problems. So if you mention them on a podcast, what happens is other old guy hears you and goes, "That guy's just like me. That's why I gained weight because I rolled my ankle and I can't do the thing I love."
Tell you more than you want to know about prostate cancer, hair coming out of nose and ears, thyroid cancer, my CPAP machine now. Yeah, I'm
Have you been
weight.
diagnosed with 2 types of cancer in your life?
Yeah. And certified as 9/11 cancers, by the way.
I did not realize that about you. These are cancers that you think or can connect to September 11th post.
I think if you have, I was on the last train into the PET station when the first jet hit in the World Trade Center. And like an idiot, I stuck around because I am a journalist. And so I was a block away from the South Tower when it came down. So I ingested all that stuff. And then.
So I guess I didn't realize that. I mean, there's certain things that are so toxic, but if you're just around something for a few hours or a day or even a few days, that it really can cause long-term damage.
There's no way to prove it, but there was a process to go through with the World Trade Health Center thing. So I thought, okay, I'll go in and it mainly was also kind of sharing stuff. I offered them my briefcase, which I still have in plastic, as if they thought this was going to be some valuable artifact. They thought I was nuts, but to add the data to the pool. And so I went in and did it. So yeah, they certified me for thyroid cancer, prostate cancer, CPAP stuff, PTSD. And then I also have atrial fibrillation, which actually came right after the event. So yeah, I'm a mess.
Wow. Well, I like, what are we calling it? Old guys talking about the problems? Is that the name of the show? Because
what do you have? You're not old yet, though. You're bald, but you're not old.
I have, but that's not in any way debilitating. As a matter of fact, it makes life easier. Not unlike wearing the same thing every day. I don't have to do anything but shave my head. I'm good. During my meditation every single day, I do a whole gratefulness about my body is working fairly efficiently, and then let's keep trying to take care of this engine, because you're not in that much control of it. But I think I'm really lucky genetically. I really do, and I don't even want to say that out loud.
How old are you?
46.
So at 50, will you get your prostate tested, or even now?
Well, I test it myself daily. Is that too much information? Maybe earlier. I don't know the difference between the colon and the prostate in terms of when regulations are such. I'm supposed to do a colonoscopy, which
colonoscopy is at 50, but I think even now prostate tests.
Yeah, my grandfather had colon cancer, so they're like, maybe you should do it a little earlier.
Yes, do it.
And
have you done that?
I did. No, but when I was in my early 20s, I was having some issues, just some blood coming out of my butt, and I didn't want to say stool. I just didn't want to say stool. I didn't want to. I hate that word.
And poop is too infantile.
Right. So anyway, I got what was called a sigmoidoscopy, where it's a milder version. I think it's just it doesn't go up as far, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. So I'm looking forward.
Yeah. The prep is better now. The prep used to be pretty bad. It was truly explosive. It's a little better now.
Well, it's funny that you said. I was just about to say. It seems like men talk way more about the drink and the prep than the scope and the procedure.
You're out. The scope's fine. And you wake up and they give you cookies. That's nice.
Is that right?
Yeah.
All right. Well,
nobody expected this topic.
Well, no, I think we should talk about this. And I just want to add one more thing. I mean, in this new podcast that you and I are going to co-host, we're, men of a certain age, we can talk about solutions. And so when you talk about hair coming out of places like ears and stuff, we can then discuss which trimmers work. Because I have a trimmer that really does the job. It's one of the long ones with the teeth on, and I love it. It really clears those ear hairs and nose hairs, etc.
You know the brand?
No, but I'll put it up and link it to our conversation. See if they'll sponsor our new show.
I've got a beard trimmer to recommend.
Oh yeah. I've got a whole case of them that I've collected over the time. All right, let's stick with the lighter-ish subject before we get to some of the more serious stuff. Are you and am I a fair weather sports fan? In this case, talking about tennis. I don't really watch tennis much. Certainly don't sit and watch it for a long period of time. But it does seem like everybody's paying attention to the U.S. Open because Serena Williams announced her retirement, and most people know her story. Are we just fair weather tennis people, or are you a real tennis? Because everybody was watching, including you last night. And who's at that match? What billionaires are there that get to watch her last match and also pay $28 for a Poland Spring?
Yeah. So my wife and daughter are both big tennis fans and tennis players.
Okay.
So we used to go to the U.S. Open every year. But the pandemic, we didn't, and we just gave up our seats because we don't be around tons of people without masks, even if it's outdoors, screaming behind us. So no, thank you. And I was nervous both times. I started off watching Serena and saying, I can't watch. I don't want to watch. But she's so brilliant. And I look at the score and say, oh, she's doing well. Then I turn the TV back on. And
wow, you're really serious. It really affects you.
Yeah, we're a huge Roger Federer family.
Oh,
and watching him lose is traumatic.
Well, then let me ask you the question that you can seriously answer because you have thought a lot about and read a lot about. You're almost a scientist, but when it comes to COVID, you've covered it in every different arena, and I didn't realize you were such a tennis fan. So what does Jeff Jarvis say about, what's his name, the Swiss guy, Djokovic, or whatever his name is, who refused to get vaccinated? The U.S. Open wouldn't, or is it the United States won't let people?
The United States wouldn't.
The U.S. government won't let anybody into this country
because there's American players who haven't taken the vaccination who are playing.
Okay,
because they're Americans.
Okay, so they're American players, unvaccinated, but you can't get into the country under any kind of circumstances if you're not vaccinated. I didn't realize
I think is right. I think Djokovic has been a terrible jerk about all of this.
Yeah.
And even though it might be a little unfair that Americans complain he can't, I don't care. Screw it.
Okay, final tennis-related question. I think a lot about Venus and Serena's relationship. And I watched that movie and I've read a bit, but man, that must be a fascinating challenge. I wonder if I always just make assumptions based on nothing, that if you're those two women, your relationship, and there's like several other sisters, a family, that must be tough for obvious reasons, but maybe it's like amazing and healthy and they all love each other and they never have problems. But when you think about the problems that you have with your family over money or ego or whatever, I can't imagine how hard it must be to be that family in a weird kind of way.
Yeah, but the other way to think about it, I think, is that who's going to understand you better?
Yeah, good point. Good point.
And Serena always gives credit to Venus that she said she wouldn't be there without, the competition she felt with her older sister. Something. I mean, the other part so I know, I knew, I don't know him now, but Alexis Ohanian, who is Serena's husband, who I knew back in the days when he started Reddit, really great guy. And I wonder too about that life and their magnificent daughter, Olympia. That's got to be really interesting to be just suddenly. I mean, Alexis had people who knew him because of Reddit, but boom, you are in the vortex of fame. And everything that comes about it, especially when it's a black woman who's famous and you're a white man. And it's got to be an amazing perspective to suddenly join a family of celebrity, too.
Do you have any insight or thoughts about or no knowledge of who is getting tickets to Serena's final matches? And it's like, it would seem it's every famous, wealthy black person that has the desire to go gets kind of the head of the line, which I think is totally fine. But I'm sure there's some rich white asshole that's like trying to put himself ahead of, I don't know, LL Cool J. I don't know. Tiger Woods was there, I saw.
Tiger
but like,
there, yeah.
it's just like, I'm kind of just a little bit gossipy about who's there. Who's there?
I wonder whether her camp is involved at all. Did they give her seats that she could dole out, or is it just simply a marketplace in capitalism, and it's worth it for them to outpay the boring white guys? I don't know. Yeah,
well, there's got to be some hedge fund asshole that paid $5,000 for a second round seat or more, probably, right?
Yeah.
Jeff Jarvis, you are a professor of journalism. And I always love to talk about media and journalism with you. And I wanted to ask you about CNN and Brian Stelter and reliable sources and the conversation about CNN and its political angles that a lot of people are having about that network because it's in transition, obviously, and their online streaming platform failed or was canceled. And what are your thoughts on CNN right now and what their future is or what direction they're headed in?
The truth is, I'm more of a regular MSNBC watcher and have been for some time.
Yeah.
So I'm not expert in it, but I watched Brian, and Brian was the one person who was left to really cover media. I got an AP writer got mad at me when I tweeted that. Yeah, I'm still here covering media, but this is somebody who was allowed to, in a position to, have a viewpoint. So David Carr is gone. May he rest in peace. Margaret Sullivan has just retired from the Washington Post. Neither has an ombudsperson anymore. Stelter was kind of it in terms of being able to comment on and criticize media. And Stelter, I've been a Stelter fan since he was a kid in a dorm room at Towson when he started the blog Cable Newser. And he did it anonymously because he didn't want anybody to know he was just a kid in the dorm. And he did an amazing job. Brian Williams would, call him with scoops and made a career of it, getting hired by the New York Times, getting to be Goombas with David Carr, then wanting to be desperately to be on television, going to CNN. And there, it's not like Brian's opinions were scorching hot, but he was not afraid to call Fox what it is, a propagandist. He was not afraid to call Trump what he is, a liar. And even that, Chris Licht and CNN couldn't take. And I find that really troublesome for the future of CNN. We had signals other than that before where he's saying, well, we're going to return to not having opinions like we're not human beings. We're going back to some glory days that CNN never had, and in that definition. And so I find it to be a really, really troubling thing. And he was dealt with such, what's the word I want? He was just kicked out. It's like, your show's off and you're gone, goodbye.
unceremoniously.
Yeah, it really was. And I like Brian. He cares a lot. He's very smart. I would hope that maybe the Washington Post and the New York Times should do a deal with MSNBC and give him a slot in both. But we'll see what happens. I don't know what his deal is. He's moving out here near me in Jersey, I understand.
Oh.
And, I hope his career has next steps, and I hope that he can show up MSNBC in some way or another. But show up at CNN rather. But I do think it's troubling for CNN. I think it's troubling for the ownership they're under now. Let's remember that Discovery, which now is merging with them and owns them, is also behind the right-wing station in the UK. And so I would fear that we could have Fox Light here. It's not just that, they're going to go back and be objective. There is no such thing as objectivity. But worse than that, they might paint conservative, sympathetic views as if under the rubric of being fair and, what do we say, balanced.
Right. Let's hear from somebody who is very anti-marriage equality or even questions the science around vaccines or climate or any other type of nonsense. Yeah.
I got a question for you. Did you see the story today in the Times, the 3 people who've become active in the school boards?
No.
So they have a story. They have a podcast, and they put the transcript up today. 3 people who are active in the school boards. Like, it's like my friend Pete. And one was there because he was upset about how the pipeline of school to jail for Black young people. One was there because was upset about COVID school openings. And one upset about what we're teaching our kids. And the problem with it was it made what you're doing in your school district into a generalizable trend that puts you in the same bucket as the person who's coming to the school board screaming about how don't make my kid a transsexual, right? And when you put everybody together in that same bucket, you lose all the nuance of it. You just make it a simple New York Times trend of people are mad at their schools. Well, some people have a reason to be, and some people are just causing trouble, making others have to come in and defend the schools, which is what you're doing.
I want to read that article. It's upsetting to hear that it was formatted that way. But, I think that I have just one thought about. Did you have a question specifically?
No, just to
my one
hear where your thought is, your head is now on schools.
My thing is, like, if you want to complain about a thing in your town or in your workplace or in your whatever it is, you should learn about it. And when it comes to schools, like, if I've got a problem with the principal or my daughter has an issue with a teacher, I try to behave like a detective or a journalist and also a decent person, where I go and I talk to the person and I get a fuller view of the issue. And for example, everybody's mad that this year in the school, they got rid of the time between periods from 5 to 3 minutes. The students are upset. The teachers are a little upset. It makes everything harder. And so the quick hot take for anybody is, the new principal did this, or the board did this, or they just did this out of whatever. So I go in and I ask about that, and come to find out, as you would imagine, Jeff, it's a pretty nuanced issue. New York State guidelines said you have to be in class this many minutes or hours a day, and they were coming up short. And so they had to find the time, and that's a hard thing to do because there's a lot of different stakeholders, teachers, students, sports, all of it. And so it's hard. These issues are hard. So before you go complaining, write an email, make an angry call, storm into the school, do a little work before you ask for a book to be banned. Fucking read it. That's my point. Like, no matter what you're afraid of or what's happening, go and find out as much as you can. It's not hard. This isn't, Mar-a-Lago, top secret files. You can find out most of what you want about public schools and what's going on in your kid's school. That's my thought about all the outrage. Go be a responsible adult and learn a little bit before you start ranting and spreading word on Facebook, which leads me to my next question for you, because the community Facebook page, and every community in America has one, and the rest of the world, has replaced, this is my stark statement, the community Facebook page is what is taking the place of local journalism. You want to know what happened at the town board? Just ask somebody who knows somebody who went and writes an angry rant, and it's all riddled with rumors and falsehoods. That's how people learn about what's happening in their town, Jeff. It's dangerous.
Yes, I think this goes way, way back. I mean, in my Cub years as a reporter, I covered Addison, Illinois, and I went to those meetings where people got into fist fights over things. So there was still anger and rancor then. B, yes, I might have covered the school board meeting, but I didn't know a darn thing. I'd pop in, go to 1-2 hour meeting, leave, and write about it as if I knew anything. Maybe do a little bit better job than that, but it was never great. I like a model in Chicago called City Bureau. One of the leaders is a guy named Daryl Holliday, and they're training citizens to do just the kind of work you just described. This is how you go find out an answer. This is how you go cover a meeting. This is how you share it responsibly. And then they pay the people for their work. Not a lot of money, but they respect their time and pay them for that and train them for this so that they can know how to do it. That's not really about let's make everybody into a journalist. Instead, it's about let's make the conversation that's occurring smarter and more informed, which I think is really a wise way to go.
I like it. I like that there's any kind of effort to solve this problem. I mean, we had people posting things on Facebook, including videos of students, and then writing a narrative around it, which was the opposite of what actually happened. And the damage that it does and did here in my community is incalculable to that family and to people's views on things.
Yeah. The larger issue there is I think we're in a process where we've been thrown in together in a new place where we don't have the rules for how to interact.
Right.
And the first response is to do the things we couldn't do before. Good, I can get mad at everybody, right? But then it falls upon the yous of the world to go to the effort to set standards and norms and shame people for not meeting them. Whoa, what did you do there? Did you really want to do that? Should you have done that? It puts you in the position of having to be the nanny a bit. But how else are we going to negotiate our norms? How else are we going to find a way unless we all take responsibility for that? Saying Facebook has to clean this up is absurd. They don't know what's going on in your school district. They don't know what's right and wrong. You don't want them to become judging on that kind of stuff. So it's up to the community to police itself.
I'm actually, just to be clear, not blaming Facebook in this case at all. I'm just saying, I'm blaming the community. I don't know what I'm blaming. I'm just saying that without any kind of reliable reporting and with the internet,
yes,
Facebook being the most obvious and I think popular platform for white people in their 40s, like to post things, at least in my community, there's like 10 community Facebook pages and they are so influential. What gets said there, it gets people elected, unelected, damages people. Again, I'm not blaming Facebook. If it wasn't Facebook, something else, it would be something else.
In fact, it was long before there was internet. When I covered town meetings, they literally got into fist fights. So, the anger, the hatred was already there. To come out through other ways. The other thing, I'm curious about another rise up a little bit higher in the altitude and low in the oxygen here. I wonder about, in an internet age, that the greater impact is on our view of local. You have kids in school, so you care about the school boards. At some point, they're going to go off to college and bankrupt you. And then you're still going to care about the schools because you're Pete and you're responsible, but you're going to care less as time goes on. And the communities that I feel are local to me, I mean, you're there, I'm here. I'm a lot closer to you than I am to any of my neighbors because too many of them are Trumpists and I don't know what's going on with them. Right? I don't talk to my neighbors. I don't have anything to do with my neighbors. I don't need to. And they would think it's really weird if I just popped up. I know a couple, but the rest, they don't want to know me. I've gone to their home. They move in. I go to their home. I give them my email address. I give them my phone number. I say, if you have any questions, need anything, never hear from them. They don't want any contact.
Right.
I don't really want any contact.
Right.
So this idea that local is the most important institution, and if local journalism fails, well, democracy fails, and everything's about local, I don't know that I buy that. I think the opportunity we have now is to have new definitions of local. On Twitter, I have my COVID list. I also have my book history wonks list of book history academics out there who do all this great research. I'm a lot closer to them than my town. I have more affinity and affection for them than I do for my town. And so I feel that's my new local.
You're making me think, as you always do, but none of that is going to matter. None of those people that look, let's just be honest. If your water pipes break, Jarvis, I don't give a shit. Even though we're friends, I'm not doing anything for you. The point being, like, if you have journalists covering what's going on with your water pipe, your town is that, these however many hundred people care about the new plant that's going to come in town and pollute. I don't live there.
Right.
So I don't
know that local is the be all and end all of journalism or anything else. Now that then says what we need probably is different institutions like City Bureau,
right,
to change the nature of the local conversation for those things when we do have to communicate with each other, and we should do a better job of it. But it's not all consuming to most sane people, I think.
All right, let's talk about a couple of other issues that I wanted to get your take on, as always. We're here at the end of the week, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this week at Mar-a-Lago, or this week at the aftermath, or what we're finding out about. What are we calling it? The DOJ, the search of Mar-a-Lago, Trump literally and his lawyers incriminating themselves. Like, just Chris Hayes said it last night. Shut up. What are you doing? You're putting some of these other scandals he's been able to get around, but, for a lot of different reasons, he's admitting basically to taking the files, calling them his. Anyway, what do you think of all of this? I haven't talked to you, and everybody's saying the walls are closing in, which I've been hearing for 17 years, it seems. And more importantly, though, there are like a lot of conservative-minded people either saying stuff like he's going to get indicted, or just not saying anything at all, which is also should be taken as a sign. What are your thoughts on his current situation and how it's being handled by DOJ, FBI, or anybody else?
It's an amazing, entertaining, horrifying circus as ever.
Yeah.
But I think it's distracting us from the bigger crimes. And I hope to hell that the Justice Department is equally as diligent in pursuing those. January 6th, stolen elections, efforts to steal elections, effort to undercut fair and free elections. Those are much bigger crimes. Now, if these are the only crimes that they can get on, okay, fine. And will they? No, they're sending signals they're not going to do anything until after the midterms. And I don't know politically whether that's good or bad for our side. If they indicted him, it could motivate the right more. I don't know. But so it's as everything, it's the show in front of our nose, and it's fascinating, and it's somewhat rewarding to see him be so stupid and to be in trouble. But it doesn't really grapple with the larger issues of democracy. So we'll see. Yeah, I was texting with some friends the other day. I'm curious your thoughts about this too. Joe Scarborough is, what happens to the Republican Party is the Republican Party exists in any form that's meaningful now. It simply doesn't. And so I was trying to think through a scenario, not predicting, but wishing for the upcoming elections. First, of course, I hope in the midterms that the Democrats win like crazy. God knows we don't know, and we're not going to do it unless we get out there. And I'm very fearful that the Biden administration has done tons of great stuff, has not delivered on its promises to Black Americans. But let's just say that we do well in the midterms. And then my curiosity is, what if Liz Cheney runs against Trump in the primaries? Obviously, she's not going to win. Obviously, she's going to get trounced, but she has an opportunity to constantly poke the bear and poke the bear's handlers, right? And she has said that it's going to take a few election cycles for anything positive to maybe happen. So let's say they lose big again, just saying.
Republicans?
And she doesn't run as a third party. I don't want her to run as a third party, for God's sakes. But let's just imagine that the Republican Party looks at itself and says, oh, shit, man, we're losing everything. What kind of realization might that yield? Could that lead to any change to bring a right sanity in the country? Or is it just too far gone and we have to end up at civil war before the wounds get cauterized?
Well, my simple thoughts, and I'd love to get your reaction, is that the only thing that matters, and it's hard to predict, is what right-wing media does. The most powerful people, frankly, the younger ones too, like Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro, much less your Mark Levin's and your Sean Hannity's and your Tucker Carlson, like wherever they go and whatever they do, they will lead a certain high, frighteningly large percentage of American voters and citizens. And when we talk about what will the Republican Party do, which is kind of the question you're asking, will they moderate? Will they come to their senses on certain things? I feel like the answer is that all depends on Tucker and Crowder and Shapiro and anyone, a number of ones I don't know and aren't familiar with that have huge followings that are crazy and saying things just to get clicks and ratings and whatever they're doing.
Speaking of which, a couple things on Murdoch, the most evil man in English-speaking democracy.
Yes.
Two things about him. One thing that came out in the Elizabeth Spires review of Jared Kushner's book in the Washington Post. The New York Times had a review of the book, which was a fun knifing of it. But Elizabeth, having worked for Kushner at The Observer, did, I think, a very serious piece. And buried in there was one little fact that I found fascinating. Jared was bragging that Rupert Murdoch had given him a book. The book that Rupert Murdoch gave him, apparently handing out, is a book that believes in the bell curve and believes that white people are superior.
No way.
So you have Rupert Murdoch out there doing white supremacy crap and not getting reported. I constantly, as you know, because you have Julia Chesky on, constantly worry that we don't cover Fox enough as an actor in this play. So I think that goes to your point about what's behind the Hannitys and the Carlsons. Meanwhile, if I may just plug to my friends in Australia, Crikey, which is a small, smart journalistic outlet in Australia, had an op-ed saying that the Murdochs were unindicted co-conspirators with Trump and company in January 6th. That's all they said about the Murdochs. Lachlan Murdoch went batshit, sent all kinds of lawyer letters. Crikey put all the lawyers' letters up. Crikey took out an ad in the New York Times. Australian papers wouldn't take the ad, saying, come after us. Go ahead. Come on, sue us. And Murdoch is suing them now. And so Crikey now has a GoFundMe page, which I'm going to contribute to today, trying to raise $5 million because the Australian libel laws are awful. And Murdoch, Kevin Rudd, the former Prime Minister of Australia, I always get the Rudds confused. Yeah, Kevin Rudd, has been trying to get a parliamentary investigation into Murdoch's monopolies in Australia and their impact. Politicians are scared of him there, even more than here. And he has a malign influence on democracy in Australia, England, and the United States. That story's still not getting covered sufficiently. And so I'm blathering on to your basic point here, which is right, is that where media goes, there goes democracy, and where media goes is where Murdoch tells them to go.
Interesting. Yeah, I hope everybody looks into that story about that outlet, Crikey. And I had no idea about it until you told me about it before we started talking. And I certainly didn't know the story you just said that you learned, I think, in the Washington Post review of Jared Kushner's book. And I found it here in that review by Elizabeth Spears of the book. She writes, Kushner is often unaware of the implications of his name dropping. Quote, when I heard the crowd's reaction that night in Springfield, he writes of a Trump rally, it reminded me of a book that Rupert Murdoch had given me months earlier. Charles Murray's Coming Apart, and unquote. Kushner is oblivious to the significance of endorsing Murray, co-author of The Bell Curve from 1994, which asserted controversial views on race and intelligence that have since been discredited. But Kushner absolutely understands the status implications of emphasizing his relationship with Murdoch. Wow, good review. More importantly, holy shit, Charles Rupert
Murdoch Southern Poverty Law Center lists Charles Murray as one of their most dangerous characters, using racist pseudoscience and misleading statistics to argue the social inequality is caused by genetic inferiority of Black and Latino communities, women, and the poor in their description. So this is what Murdoch is handing out, people. That's the quiet part in print.
Part of the problem that I think that we have in the world today is this lack of trust, deterioration in expertise. We've talked about this before, but I was reminded by it this week when Joe Rogan was talking with the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers, Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers, controversial guy regarding his anti-vax status, but he's kind of really, in my opinion, Aaron Rodgers started to step into this role that he's gotten, which is to be this skeptic. And he's on with Rogan, and he mentions a study to back them up. And therein lies the problem that we have, that just about anybody, including a professional football player with a platform, can mention a study and put it out there, and it just doesn't matter. But they think that they're smart. And just thinking about this as it relates to Charles Murray's work, convincing a whole bunch of people that, you know, one race is more inferior or one is better than the other. And it's such a huge problem that I have a platform and I can say whatever I want. And I think I'm smart because I read a story about a study, which the journalist probably misinterpreted to begin with.
I'm gonna get this wrong. There was an academic who wrote a paper I quoted in some writing I'm doing, and I'm going to get his phrase wrong. It wasn't this, but he basically talked about justification marketplaces. He used a different word than justification. But what he says is that when people want to believe something, it creates an entrepreneurial opportunity to create the marketplaces for the justification of their beliefs. And a lot of this isn't about social media or even Fox News convincing people of things. They already have the belief. It's not like everybody was just a wonderful person until the moment they turned on the electricity. We've rampant racism in this country for centuries, obviously, and hatred and bigotry and ignorance and all kinds of good things. And so that gets exploited and used to mutual benefit by these marketplaces.
Really interesting that there's well, of course there's scholarship or insight on that, but that's one of my favorite things about talking with Jarvis. I can come up with a thing that I'm seeing, a trend, and of course I'm not being self-deprecating, but of course it's not an original observation. I mean, this is the shit that people have been studying for a long, long time in terms of the way media gets interpreted, much less science gets interpreted.
Well, let me confess something here, though. So, you know, I have the privilege of having tenure at a university teaching journalism. The truth is, I only have a bachelor's degree. I'm a poseur at the Palace.
Oh, had I known that, I would never have had you on the show.
Turn off the recording now. And the truth is, in my reporting career, I didn't go look up academic journals and look up academic papers. I called a few professors to get the quotes that I knew they'd say and I wanted in my narrative. I didn't do that at the beginning of my teaching time. I've been here 15 years. I didn't fully understand the wealth that was sitting right next to me in the library and the access I have to things. Then when I started writing a book or two, I learned how much is there, and it's just magnificently eye-opening. I'm ashamed that I didn't do this before. I tell the students, you've got to do this now. And yes, you can find one bad paper, and that doesn't do anything. But if you do enough of a literature read to see where things are going, if you see who's smart and what they're doing, there's tons of work in the academe that has real value to these discussions in our democracy. And we need to get them in more. They're not.
It's just the thing that frustrates me the most is that no science is perfect. No health science is perfect. But why is it so hard for journalists to understand or anybody to understand kind of the aggregate of the science on a thing where it's not that controversial, something like vaccines or climate? I mean, certain things like the benefits of, I don't know, I'm making stuff up, the causes of an illness or the therapies, the procedures, they're more controversial in science, medical science. I guess I'm talking about health science, but like, it's not hard to figure out that that 99% of researchers on this issue think this, and we don't need to write some other point of view about, in this case, maybe vaccines.
Well, even worse than that, I think that's part of it is that stupid two-sided both sidesism thing. But also it's the problem that we in journalism, and I put myself here, not you, because you're just a comedian, so you can enforce yourself from these bad traits.
Thank you.
We in journalism take the latest word as the last word. We have this hubris of writing the first draft of history. Everything must be new, else it's not news. And so there's a story that comes out that says wine is bad for you. Well, then wine for all times is going to be bad for you until 2 weeks later when another study comes out and wine is good for you. We don't put the two together. We don't cover process. Politics is process. Science is process. Life is process. But we don't do that because we think that we want to have this thing that's embossed in type and is final and is good for the ages. It's not. And that's kind of the lie of the Gutenberg age. Is that things are set down in type and they shouldn't be. Yeah.
Really great insights about kind of, I guess, the incentives, which are often wrong. another thing I wanted to ask you about is, speaking of, bad books and bad people, the book 2,000 Mules, written by conservative author, conspiracy theorist, and bad person Dinesh D'Souza, was supposed to hit a criminal too, right? Convicted criminal. Yeah. He was pardoned by Trump. It's supposed to hit bookshelves on August 30th. It's been recalled because of an unspecified, quote, significant error. The release of the book comes after the debut of Dinesh D'Souza's film of the same name, 2,000 Mules, which claims widespread fraud in the 2020 presidential election. And Jeff, I don't know if you knew this, because I didn't know this, but like the film, the book alleges that Democratic Party and, quote, mules, actual mules, carrying bags of votes, swayed results.
It's not a metaphor. It's real mules.
No, it's real. The Democratic Party and mules carrying bags. Oh, maybe they weren't actual mules.
Oh, okay.
Either way, this is what swayed the results in Joe Biden's favor. Dinesh D'Souza wrote on Truth Social.
Well, then
that early copies of his book had been recalled. And my main question to you is just to speculate. You know a bit about publishing. Why a publisher would recall a book because of an error? It seems like anybody can publish anything these days.
Yeah, especially Regnery. Is that how you say it? That's the publisher. You go to Barnes. I get upset when I go to Barnes and Noble and I see their books. It's just propaganda put there. A decent bookstore wouldn't have them up there, but they'd probably get shot if they didn't have them in there. Anyway, this publisher of all publishers will publish anything, and this is something so bad they won't publish it. Nancy Levine, perhaps Levine, I apologize, Nancy, if I'm wrong, that's her Twitter handle, has been on this case, and she's been going after the publisher and D'Souza, trying to say what was wrong, and she hasn't gotten anything yet. The presumption here is that something that was terribly actionable, and maybe with all of the voting machine suits against Fox, the lawyers for the publishing company said, whoa, trouble here. But they didn't merely say, well, we're going to delay it. They pulled the books back that were in the distribution center to, I guess, destroy them. So it's expensive what they did. And he's saying, he tweeted that in response to Nancy, that, the book's still coming out, and I've already had more bestsellers than I can count, and my documentaries have grossed over 100 million, making me the most successful political filmmakers of all time. The redistribution of wealth to stupidity is a real problem. I forget who it was, gave a $1.6 billion donation to a PAC. The money that is concentrated in that part of the world and how they're using it is just depressing as hell.
Oh, yeah. That's the one that Leonard Leo is running.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that was true, that he was the highest grossing, if you want to put him in the category of political filmmaker. The other one would be like a Michael Mann or something, I guess, or Michael Moore. But how do you make that much? That's like Marvel feature money. I don't know where that money comes from for a guy like Dinesh D'Souza.
They did or not.
I don't know how he's monetized.
How much does Trump raised based on just sending people emails acting the victim? Yeah,
well, that's a different story, though. People.
It's not a purchase of a valued product. It's a contribution to a schmuck's cause.
There's my soundbite. Finally, Sarah Palin lost in a what is it called? The ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice voting. Yep.
Tom, Alaskans, and we can talk about this, but Alaskans voted for this system. The people of Alaska voted. They wanted ranked choice voting, and Senator Tom Cotton and others are like, it was rigged. This is not fair. She got 60% of the votes and she didn't win, and everybody reacted. Have you seen the Electoral College? But just the politics around a Democrat winning a special election in Alaska, and the general mood of the country is, I guess, my last question to you, Jeff, which is, how much do you think this decision by the Supreme Court to take women's rights away over their body has had an effect on these elections or the momentum as we head into the midterms? What are your thoughts?
First, God is an Alaskan and she votes. This is good news. I can't imagine. Nothing makes me happier than seeing the comeuppance of Sarah Palin. Second, I saw an analysis on Twitter this week that I can't remember who did it. I apologize. That the two Republicans who were in hated each other. If they hadn't had such rancor, more voters would have made each of the other their second choice, but they didn't. So some number of Republicans had no choice, I guess, or chose the Democrat over the person who doesn't like Sarah Palin. because they're that motivated. And the Democrat got a plurality of votes in the first, and then won fair and square. To your larger point, I don't want to be at all sanguine about going into the election. I'm as ever. I'm frustrated with coverage. I mean, the all of the media were Biden's not doing anything. Biden's in trouble. Biden's in deep crap. Biden's awful. And then Biden starts doing stuff because he knows how to do his job, and it takes time, and he does it. And suddenly, it shifted around. It can change the election. I think I've made this rant before. I hate election predictions. They don't inform the electorate. They take away the agency of the electorate before the election. They're bad and they're wrong most of the time. And the election matters when it occurs. So circumstances change. Gas prices are coming down. People are back at work. The economy is all in really, really good shape. And so the things that are attributed to a president as if one person can make all that difference are now on the positive when they were on the negative. And all of that was meaningless. I think you're right that the Dobbs decision will have an impact. I just saw MSNBC had a poll up, which somebody tweeted this morning, that said that it had men versus dads in a generic congressional ballot. So from May to August, men generally went from plus 13 Republican to plus 9 Republican, which is a 4-point shift to the left. But dad went from 20 plus Republican to 8 plus Democrat, a shift of 28 points. Now, that can be interpreted in a few ways. One is that dads are standing up for the rights of their daughters. Yay. Another is that dads don't want to become granddads a lot sooner than they would have thought.
I recommend Nature Made Vitamins.
Sorry, I'm finding,
because I trust their quality.
I'll edit that out, but I'm finding the men and fathers are shifting toward Dems since May, according to polling. This is fascinating what you're telling me.
Fox News poll on top of that. It was quoted on MSNBC.
Who even does such a poll? Men versus dad?
Who asked dads?
I love it. Wow. That's hard to misinterpret. I mean, your interpretation, I don't know if that's informed by anything, but it certainly does make sense. But I mean, it's just such an obvious thing with all of the issues that we talk about in life. Like your opinion changes once you have an experience. Your opinion about girls, women changes when you have that's why I always get irked when sometimes usually women be like, you should just be good to women. You shouldn't have to have a daughter. I'm like, yeah, that'd be nice. That would be nice if that were the way it worked. But the fact that I do have a daughter has helped me see things differently. Yeah. Not that I was ever a monster, but still, like this kind of thing, once you have the experience, that's why asking dads, that's interesting.
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that fascinating?
Wow.
So I think the Democrats have to go overboard, I think, in, let's say it, capitalizing on this. I think it's the opportunity to say this is what's going to happen, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse.
For sure.
I'm still nervous about Georgia. I mean, how can that be at all close? Yeah. I'm still nervous about Pennsylvania. God bless Fetterman and may his health stay in good shape, even though Dr. Oz is a complete cynical asshole and non-doctor.
Well said.
I'm nervous about the House. I'm nervous about lots of things, and we've got to stay nervous. And so I hope that indeed we do see feisty Joe out there now.
Yeah.
I hope we hear that tonight on his this we're talking before he's going to give his talk to the nation tonight. And I hope he stays in that attitude, because he's got to be out there as the guy who's fighting for us to save democracy. That's what it's got to be.
Just a quick follow-up. What you're saying is when you turn on MSNBC or cable news, or you hear a conversation about the latest polling and the horse race, you think that is worthless and does more damage. It doesn't help anybody, and it retards the actual election by making people think a certain thing. So you think that's a waste of time for media to really discuss or do a segment about where we're at, where in terms of what the polls show?
Absolutely, in a whole bunch of ways. There's a brilliant media academic, the late James Carey from Columbia University, who wrote something I quote all the time, saying that opinion polling was the death of democracy because it preempted the public conversation it was intended to measure. Right? The opinion pollster comes in and they set the binaries of the poll. They set the agenda of the poll. They decide what the issue is. They express it in their way. And we have no chance at expression or nuance in that. And we get put in our binary buckets as a result. And then stupid things get asked and interpreted in stupid ways. So, for example, approval ratings of presidents are patently worthless. As if the president can change the gas prices, as if the president can change inflation when the world around is inflation. They have become a proxy for general mood at the time. Now, that mood is pretty meaningless when an election can be months or years off, point one. Point two, they get misinterpreted. Well, everybody's pissed at Biden about gas prices. Yeah, some are stupid enough they're going to use it in that way, but that's clearly ridiculous, and the journalists should know better. And polling is damaging to democracy. Absolutely. It's a story that I wish I had the academic chops to figure out how to demonstrate that and show that. But I also think these days, people, especially on the right, delight in lying to pollsters.
Yeah. I think that's a larger trend maybe than, there's data on that, I believe. But, Okay, now you've forced me to ask one more question. You didn't force me at all, but I was thinking about Biden's speech tonight, a primetime speech in Philadelphia, his second visit to Pennsylvania in 3 days. And the theme turned his attention to the threat of American democracy. And earlier this week, I think it was, that he was in apparently a private fundraiser. He gave a speech in Maryland, which had the term Dark Brandon trending on social media. But yeah, the fiery, you're calling him fiery, that version of him. But apparently, and he said a lot of things about the MAGA movement, but apparently privately at a fundraiser, he referred to Trump Republicans, the MAGA movement, or something else as semi-fascist. And that lit up media, pundits, analysts. I care most about the opinion on this of historians who have studied fascism. And so I took a look at what Tim Snyder and what Ruth Ben-Ghiat and what Kenneth C. Davis and other people I talked to said. But what is your reaction to the reaction of the president of the United States referring to the MAGA movement as, quote, semi-fascist?
I think he did it in a fairly public way. I don't think it was something that was not a hot mic moment. He chose to say it, and he chose to make that judgment. And he's right, number one. The semi is an interesting hedge, which I think really says we can stop from arriving at full fascism, but we got to work at it. What upset me was that after that speech and after that declaration, which I think was so newsworthy and so important, there was no mention of it on the front page on the homepage of the New York Times. Washington Post covered it, buried it, in my view. I think this was an important moment because it really marked a time when Biden, the conciliator, is calling out the fascism that exists on the other side and calling it what it is. That should have more discussion, but the two major papers, especially the Times, I think did not serve us well. And so then the next thing that's going to happen, because you know what's going to happen, is GOP calls on Biden to apologize, right? And so that becomes the talking point. And they lost the opportunity to have a real discussion, to talk to Timothy Snyder and folks like that again, and say, let's talk about what fascism is, where it has existed in the world and history. What are the signs that we're heading that way? What do you do about it? You know, I go back to what we discussed earlier. I don't, unlike Joe Scarborough, I don't care what happens to the Republican Party. But let's go with his frequent questioning of that, because it does say kind of where does democracy go? And in Germany, I think they had to go so far over the line in World War before you could come back to sanity. Are we going to end up having to go so far over the line that there's no defense of it anywhere, and that's the only way to pull back? Or can we pull back from the brink now? That's what the semi matters, I think, for us to examine how far down this road are we. Media are not covering it adequately, and I think Biden's right to push them, and I hope he does more tonight.
Well said. And I think it's similar, actually, to what Ruth Ben-Ghiat said about the semi having a role to play. And they probably thought about that. Like, he didn't come up with semi-fascist. Someone came up with that in the Biden team, I'm guessing.
I wonder, Meacham, academics got, Biden had a bunch of historians come in and talk to him in the White House. Right. And Meacham was there. And this is where academics are not good. Meacham, he's not really one of us. He's not really an academic. He's written a lot of books and he's gotten prizes, so shush. And I suspect, because he's close to Biden, he might have organized the meeting for all I know. He might have brought the academics in there, the historians in there. Yeah. Be happy that there were historians talking to the president.
Yeah.
And if this is giving him that kind of perspective, and Meacham is helping write his speeches, we could have a moment. We could have a have you no decency, sir moment. We're waiting for that moment. Some give that credit to Liz Cheney. Well, that's about the specifics of January 6th. It's about the specifics of what Trump has done with elections. And bless her, I'm fine with that. Even though I disagree with her about everything on earth, I give her credit for that. But we need that higher moment. Where are we as a nation?
Where that moment where the president himself, Joe Biden, has in a speech a kind of "have you no decency," which probably wouldn't be the actual words, because we kind of know that he.
But it's that or Walter Cronkite, we're losing the Vietnam War, or LBJ finally being willing to sacrifice his presidency of the Democratic Party to the necessity of voting rights. These are fulcrum moments, and I'm praying for tonight.
What do you make of the reaction of the Charlie Kirks and the Molly Hemingways? How dare you call us a name?
Oh, they're fascists. Screw them.
Jeff Jarvis, everybody. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
All right, Jeff Jarvis. There you go. How about him? Thank you very much, sir. And thank you to Christian Finnegan as well. And thank you, most importantly, to you for listening to this show, especially if you are a paid subscriber, because I can't do it without your subscriptions. It is the beginning of the month, which means you always lose a few because people's credit cards expire. So check your credit cards and make sure they're active. And if you didn't sign up yet, do it now, please. Can't do it without your subscriptions. I'm not getting rich over here. It's a lot of work. I'm a one-man band in the shed, which is why I'm always welcoming you to help out, and I will help you as much as I can in any possible way. John Carroll has been one of those guys that's contributed so much. He sings this song to us each and every day here on the podcast. We love him. JohnCarroll.org. Go buy that yourself for $3. Buy the song. Subscribe to the show. Have an awesome weekend. Stay in the moment. Learn to meditate. Make it yours. Be the change you want to see in the world. Tell the people you love that you love them right now. And I will talk to you on Monday right here on Stand Up.
Off of your fence, even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense, and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down, boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up. Oh, got to stand